I will speak about how people with disabilities were portrayed in the Islamic tradition, so not necessarily only in the Islamic scriptures, Quran and Sunnah, but also in adab, literature, in Islamic law, in Islamic theology, also in history. And as we will see, people with mental disabilities will be focused on in the lecture of this evening. I will start first of all with the issue of terminology, because this is the main problem I faced when I was writing my dissertation about this issue. There is a great difficulty to find relevant material, especially in classical sources, classical Islamic sources, if you are going to use the modern terminology that we have, even in Arabic, the translations of people with disabilities, al-mu'awwaqun, al-mu'awwaqin, al-ma'uqin, etc. All these terms are based on translations, Arabic translations for United Nations documents. So they are this is terminology coined in the modern time, and we cannot trace it in the classical sources. And even if we are going to use this terminology, which is available now, we will have great difficulties and to come with completely different conclusions. Like, for instance, the terminology used now about i'aqa and mu'awwaq. We have the active participle of it, mu'awwiq, which appears in the Quran. But it has nothing to do with people with disabilities. It has something to do with those who drive people away from jihad. So the terminology available, modern terminology, does not help. And that's why one of the important researchers in the field, Wardat Rizq from Haifa University, she published a book on disability in Islamic law in 2007, and this was her conclusion. In classical Islamic sources, I couldn't identify any single general term that would combine all people with disabilities as a group. So she said that there is no term, there is no such a term. It did not exist in classical Islam, which is, of course, not very accurate. When we go back to the classical sources, we can find different terms referring to people with disabilities, all of them, and not only all of them, but much more than those people, like Ahlul Bala, Ahlul A'dhar, Dhawul Ahad, etc. And we see also different religious scholars who dedicated full books to people with disabilities, especially with mental disability. Like Ibn Habib, for instance, who wrote his book Uqala al-Majaneen. He's a scholar from the 10th and 11th century, which we can translate as the wise fool. And Ibn Habib, the first chapter of his book is about terminology. How can we use proper and good terms for describing people with disabilities? He mentioned more than 20 or 30 terms with too much nuances and differences between these terms. So classical Islamic scholars, they paid attention to the issue of terminology, and they elaborated on this in a very good way, I would say. The second remark about the issue of terminology is that we have generic terms indicating people with disabilities, but not indicating people with disabilities alone. So they are they refer to people with disabilities among many others. So, for instance, the two important terminologies for referring to people with disabilities in classical Islamic literature, the first one, Ahl al-Bala, this is a theological term. This is a term which we come across in literature on Islamic theology. And al-Bala here we can translate as affliction, a trouble, calamity, problem in life. People who are getting faith of test, ibtila. And in this category, we find people who have disabilities, but not only people who have disabilities. So chapters on Ahl al-Bala would speak about someone who lost his hand or his arm in a battlefield or whatever, but also someone who lost his child, whose child died in an early age or as infant or whatever. So these are ahl-balad. So we see people with disabilities as part of a larger group. In Islamic law and in fiqh, we have ashab al-a'dhar, people who have literally people with valid excuses. These are excuses which can be accepted from an Islamic legal perspective to get exempted from specific obligations, religious obligations or rituals. So we see people with disabilities who can get exempted from fasting during Ramadan, from performing all movements in prayer. So someone who cannot stand, for instance, who can only be sitting because of one or another disability. But within this category we find people who are on travel, for instance. Being on travel is also one of the valid excuses for which people can be exempted from specific obligations. So early writings, early books on Islamic theology and law, we don't find any specific chapter on people with disabilities. The first chapter we see, as far as I could trace this, there was a chapter on religious rulings, on ahkam, relevant to people with blindness, ahkamul a'ma. And the earliest reference to such a chapter was in the 11th, 12th century of Al-Ghazali, a book from Al-Ghazali, where you find a chapter on ahkam al-a'ma. Before this, we don't have any specific chapter speaking about people with disabilities specifically. But references to those people are always dispersed in different chapters. So for instance, if we go to fiqh, we have a chapter on salah, ritual prayer, and you have the rulings. And as part of the rulings, for instance, you have to wash your hand, your arm, your leg, etc. So imagine that someone who does not have this limb, what should this person do? And then you have the explanation. So always part of something of another, a larger group, a larger topic, etc. And I call this textual inclusion. So people with disabilities were not isolated on the textual level. So they were always part of a larger society. And they were not part of a fixed group, but they are moving from one group to another, depending on the topic, depending on the subject, depending on the science that is there. So the first impression is that there was a positive thing in the writings on people with disabilities in the Islamic tradition. The fact that we don't have a terminology speaking about those people only, we have a terminology speaking about them, but not about them only. Always as part of a larger group. It gives the impression in the first instance that there is something positive here and they are dealt with as part of the society as normal as possible. But this was not always the case. I could trace 5 main images, 5 main ways of portraying people with disabilities, from the one extreme to the other and something in the middle. On one of these extremes, that these people are blessed, these people are holy, they attain the rank of a saint, of wali, etc. On completely the other side, they are part of the pariah, social outcasts, completely isolated from society. And we have, especially in adab genre, comic figures, people who can be a source of laughing and entertaining, and help deserving people who are an object of charity. And the fifth one is completely in the middle, normal people. They are as normal as everyone. They can be very good, they can be very bad, they can be very intelligent, they can be very stupid, whatever. So I will speak shortly about these 5 images in the Islamic tradition. The first one, blessed and holy people. We have different words in the Islamic tradition making a link between being or seen as majnoon, which we can translate as insane, and being wali, godly saint or friend of God, on the other hand. For instance, the biographical works on awliya, like طبقات الأولياء, حلية الأولياء, صفة الصفوة of Ibn al-Jawzi, you have so many examples of people where you see a link between both aspects. On the one side, you are seen as Majnoon from the community, but on the other side, you are also seen as wali, something who is very close to God, who is almost holy. And we have here two phases. We can distinguish between two phases. The first phase is that because you are wali, you will be seen as Majnoon. Why? Because you are not living the normal life that people who are not so close to God as you are not leading the normal way of life as they do. So they will not understand what you are doing. For instance, being too permissive and too tolerant, and the way that you react to your enemies, etc. They will not interpret this in any other way. They will not understand it in any other way, except that they will describe you and label you as Majnoon. Why? Because they don't understand, they don't practice, they don't feel the ethical norms that you believe in, that you practice, that you enjoy, because you are very close to God. So the fact that you are wali, then you are very close to be Majnoon and insane from the common people, who do not have the same feelings as you. The book of Ibn Habib I referred to in the beginning, Uqala al-Majaneen, he was speaking about this. So al-Majaneen, insane people, and Uqala, the wise, the mindful people. So he wants to say that among those people that we see as Majaneen, that we see as insane, they are the real wise, the real mindful people, but we don't understand this well. So it is our problem and not theirs. The second phase, and I mean by the second phase here the modern time, is that it became more or less the opposite. The fact that you have mental problems, it means that you are very close to God. So it was the other way around. And I come from a village in Egypt, and we had this belief. In my village, we had people who have mental difficulties, and we always believe that those people have special powers because they are very close to God. They are. I remember my grandmother saying that they are living in their mind is living in paradise and not with us here. And especially in North African countries like Morocco and Algeria, they have the term Majdoob. They use it for people with mental disabilities. And Majdoob literally means someone who has been pulled, someone who has been attracted. And the meaning here is someone who has been attracted by God. God attracted to him, so he cannot be understood by the people living in this life. And in literature, they are usually called the holy fool. So here we have, it looks like a very positive image about people with disabilities. This is on one side. On completely the other side, the social outcast. And in my research about this position, I found the al-firasa genre. Al-firasa in Arabic literature, usually it is translated as physiognomy, but it's much broader than this in Arabic literature. But there was a time where physiognomy and its definition or its understanding as you understand the inner character of people from their outer appearance. Like what we see here. They say, for instance, if you have a nose like this one, you are racist, for instance. And if you have a hand with very long fingers, it means you are a thief. And if you have ears like I don't know what, it means that you are very fond of backbiting, etc. So there are standard characteristics, standard physical features, which tell you about the inner character of those people. This type of firasa, which they call al-istidlalu bil-khalqi ala al-khuluq. If you want to know the manners and the ethics of people, look at their faces, and if you see this, it means this, and if you see this, it means this. And what was dangerous for people with disabilities in this regard is that physiognomy had its ideal image about the ideal human being. So there is an ideal physical makeup. You should be like this. And any deviation from this ideal physical makeup, it means that you have defects also in your soul and in your character. So every type of disability means not only physical disability, but spiritual disability inside. Ethical disability in the character of the person. We look with so much suspicion to this type of firasa now, but earlier this was not the case, and we will explain why. There was a Greek literature. Physiognomy is a Greek pseudoscience, we can call it. Aristotle wrote about this, especially in his book attributed to him in the Arabic translation, which is called Kitab Sirrul Asrar, Secret of the Secrets. But the most important one in this field is Polemon, who is known in Arabic literature as Aflimun. Aflimun Sahib al-Farasa, Polemon, the master of physiognomy. Their books, these books on physiognomy were translated into Arabic by the end of the 9th century, or a little bit earlier, and they became very popular. Not only among the common people, but also among the elite to some extent. Why were they common? Islamic literature knew already a type of firasa, but it was a religious one, spiritual one. And like the hadith attributed to the Prophet of Islam, ittaqi farasat al-mu'min, be aware of the firasa, which means here the religious intelligence, shrewdness of a believer. And according to this type of firasa, the Sufi, mystic, spiritual firasa, it means that when you get very pure theologically and religiously speaking, you can read the ethics of people without telling you about this. You can read this because you have a specific light from God that reveals things to you. This type of firasa was a firasa for the elite, only for people who have gone through a purification process. It's not for everyone to come to conclusions about people if he is not a very close person to God. So it was not for everyone. It was not standard. You cannot learn it. It's not something to be acquired. It's something to be gifted, to be given to you. But the Greek physiognomy, it was available for everyone. You read the book, standard. If you see someone who has a nose like this, then he is like this. And if you have someone with an ear like this, then he is this. And a hand like this, then he is this. So we have a catalog, very accessible catalog. Everyone can read it and you come to conclusions. Also, it proved to be very beneficial in real life. For instance, these books spoke about advices, and this was the main aim of the book of Aristotle, Sirrul Asrar, for the kings, for instance, and princes, how to choose your advisors. If you want to choose ministers, advisors, people in your administration, and you want to know if those people are trustworthy or sneaky or whatever, how can you discover this? These books tell you. So it proved to be very helpful for kings, princes, etc. to use their company, and also for the common people to use their friends. Also, social, political, and also economic, because physiognomy was used for selecting slaves. If you want to buy a slave, male or female, and you want to use this slave for this and this job, how can you know that it will be fitting and good to buy this slave for this target? These books gave all practical advices about this. Also, there was a physiognomy of horses. Also, the physical features of horses can tell you about the type of horses that you buy. So it became very popular in the common life, this type of literature. This didn't take away, of course, the very negative side of it, and that's the discriminatory statements on people with disabilities. Like, for instance, this quotation from the book attributed to Aristotle, in which he says that be aware of a defective, one who have a defective make or having some physical imperfection. So whatever physical imperfection you see in someone, take care of it, because it means that also inside there is a problem. Because of the familiarity of these statements, we see these statements attributed even to important religious scholars, like Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i. I found that, for instance, this statement, احذر الأعرج والأحول والأعور, etc. Be aware of the lame, the cross-eyed, the one-eyed, and everyone with physical defect. They are extremely difficult to deal with. I found these statements in the books about the manaqib of Imam Shafi'i, about the good aspects of his life. And it has been mentioned more than once. In one of the chapters of my book, I dealt with these statements in detail, and I came to the conclusion that these statements are unauthentic. They are not from Al-Shafi'i, but because the whole issue of physiognomy became popular after the death of Al-Shafi'i. And we can find that these statements have been quoted literally from the books of Polemon and Aristotle, etc. And these books have been translated after his death. I came up with different arguments that these statements are not authentic from him. And also the legal manuals, books on fiqh, we don't find real influence. That physiognomy had a real influence, so that Muslim jurists will have a bad standpoint about people with disabilities. It's hardly to find in the field of Islamic law. But this was the world of legal text. In social reality, it seems that these statements and the popularity of this pseudoscience, Greek physiognomy, had bad and negative effects about the image of people with disabilities in Islamic societies. Different people with disabilities were locked down. They had difficulties to find honorable jobs, etc. Also, in the 13th century, we find a couple of leaders who wanted to seclude and isolate people with disabilities, like the Mamluk Sultan at this time, who gave an order that all people with disabilities should move to, especially the lepers, should move to Al-Fayoum. And this was a bit far away from Cairo, so that you will not mingle and mix with other people. So it had also a bad effect in society, it seems, in the Muslim communities. So these are the two sides of the spectrum: holy and saints, and on the other side, social outcasts. We have also people with disabilities as comic figures. And this was in Adab al-Nawadir, the entertaining and anecdotal literature, which depicted people with disabilities as jocular types. One of the most important books which gave this type of image about people with disabilities is the book of Ibn al-Jawzi, Nawadir al-Hamqa wal-Mughaffalin, the anecdotes of the stupid and gullible, or you can say foolish, people among the jurists, Quranic exegetes, muhaddithin, ruwah, shu'ara, udaba, etc. And the book is very entertaining. You will laugh a lot when you read anecdotes in the book. When you go through the books, you find people with mental disabilities, specifically mental disabilities. Sometimes very light form of mental disability, which we can call what he says, stupid or gullible. And sometimes it seems that people had real mental disabilities and full type of mental disabilities. The question here is that was this a bad image? Was this a bad image about people with disabilities? Was this very negative? My impression when I read the book of Ibn al-Jawzi is that this was not the case at all. And this was also not his intention at all, to make fun of those people. He was speaking about entertainment and the importance of having entertainment. And he spoke about those people as jurists, as mufassirin, as muhaddithin, as poets, as men of letters. And these people didn't have marginal positions in the society. They were very important people. So he was speaking about people who have people with disabilities as part of a community which was not marginal in the society. So I would say it was not his aim to make fun of those people, to look them down, etc. He had a different point. This can be now offending if people with disabilities would read the book. Some people would not find it like this. But this was anyhow one of the images of people with disabilities, to use them in order to laugh. The fourth image, which is very clear, especially in fiqh, in Islamic jurisprudence, help deserving people. These are people who need our help, the help from people who do not have disabilities. And we have a very complicated and intriguing system of giving financial help to those people, to take care of them financially, so that they lead a normal life in the financial sense, an honorable life in the financial sense. There is the maintenance system, the system of nafaqah within family, in which every member of family can be taken care of financially, specifically financially speaking, from other members of the family. They spoke about one's children who are entitled to maintenance as long as they cannot earn their livelihood because of illness or disability. They spoke about zamana, chronic disease or disability, we can translate. And he said that this nafaqah should cover costs of medicine, doctor's fees, and servant if necessary due to chronic disease or disability. It was common in medieval periods of Islamic history that people with disabilities needed a companion or servant. For instance, in order to go to the mosque, in order to get involved in the daily activities of society, they needed help, someone to help them. So the costs of having such a person were also included in the nafaqah system, that they have the right to get this. Also, zakat, there are different mufassirun, Quran exegetes, who made the distinction between al-fuqara wal-masakin, the poor people and the needy, that the poor people are people who do not have money but they are healthy, and the needy are the poor people who have money but they have disabilities, or vice versa. So disability was an important criteria in speaking about people who deserve zakat. And they always had priority. So if you have two persons, the one is healthy and the other one has disability, then the one who has disability is a higher priority. Also, the non-obligatory charity, sadaqah, and especially the time of endowments, of awqaf, was very important. Because with this type of charity, it was not a charity in the sense that you give them a couple of pounds or dinars or dirhams and then you leave them and go home, so that they will be all the time dependent on charity on the spot. Every day they have to beg, etc., in order to get their livelihood. This type of awqaf was giving a sort of security for those people. There have been hostels, asylums, hospitals taking care of them, and there are historical reports now. They come up with very detailed descriptions of this type of care houses for people with disabilities, specifically people with mental disabilities, what kind of treatment they got. Because in the Hellenistic medicine, in the Greek medicine, there have been some opinions that people with mental disabilities cannot be cured. And starting from Al-Razi and the following, the Muslim physicians who followed, they disagreed with this opinion. And they said that mental disabilities can be cured, and specifically can be taken care of those people. And they spoke about how to provide medical treatment for those people. And in these hospitals, there have been, for instance, they made use of music in order to make those people get relieved. They brought artists in these hospitals to do something like theater plays in order to entertain them, etc. So it was not only a matter of hardcore medicine, but also non-conventional at this time, to use music, to use art, etc., in order to treat those people. So there was the dimension of rehabilitation. And some of these hospitals, when someone get enrolled into the hospital because of mental disability or physical disability, and they have been cured, they are okay, and they will go now to get integrated into the society, and they have no money. Some of the hospitals had budget for those people to start their life. So when they get outside the hospital, in order to get integrated in the society, they get a specific amount of money with which they can start their own life and get back again into society. So when we speak about charity, we don't speak about charity on the spot and on a daily basis, and on because of which people will be dependent all the time on the rich people. It was organized through the state or through civil society, so that those people will not be, there would be a kind of rehabilitation, as we call it nowadays. So help deserving people was also an image. And the fifth image, the last one, is the normal people. I still have some time, or? Yeah? The normal people, most of the religious scholars and Muslim intellectuals nowadays, they stress that this image was the image supported by the great majority of classical Muslim scholars, and it is also the most authentic image. This is the image which has been promoted by the Quran, which has been promoted by the Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they, for instance, make use of. There is a religious scholar who wrote a very, very good book about Islam and disability, but it's very little one, and it has been distributed locally only in Morocco. I was fortunate enough to get a copy of it. And he's one of those people who support this idea about the image of the normal people. And he spoke about a hadith tradition attributed to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in which he's sitting in a company of his companions, group of his companions. And it was a person with insanity, with mental disability, who passed by. And one of the people sitting, he made a comment about him, and he said, "Oh, the idiot has passed, al-majnoon." And then the Prophet of Islam, according to the tradition, he corrected the term. And he said, "Don't use this term, oh idiot, for those people. Because the real idiot is the one who does not know his creator, and the one who does not follow the instructions of his creator. This is the real idiot. But those people," he said, "La taqul majnoon bal qul musab." This is the terminology of Ahlul Bala. People who have difficulties, who have misfortunes, who have calamities in life. They miss something that other people have. That's it. But you cannot call them with such type of terminology. So they said that according to this Moroccan scholar and many others, the Prophet, he moved the position, the status of those people from social outcast, people who are made fun of, are not welcomed in the society, to a larger group, which includes many other people. Not only people who lost their mental abilities, but who lost their children, who lost their money, who lost their job. Everyone who has a musibah, misfortune in his life. So they said it's very integrative, and it's normalizing people, even on the basis of terminology. Also, this is the same case also in the Quran. When we see in chapter 80, Surah Al-Abasa, the first 10 verses in the surah speak about a Muslim with blindness who came to the Prophet of Islam and wanted to speak with him. The Prophet of Islam was busy with prominent people from Quraysh, so he didn't pay him enough attention. And the Quran said this shouldn't be the case anymore, because those people should be also taken care of and should be dealt on equal footing with the others. It doesn't matter wealth, health, poverty, sickness, disability. It doesn't matter at all. And this very person was appointed as the leader of Medina, the capital of the Islamic State at this time, according to some historical reports, 13 times, to be the leader in the absence of the Prophet of Islam. When he is absent, this companion Abdullah ibn Maktoum was appointed as the leader of the whole community. So they say also these are normalizing the case. And they say also normalizing in the sense that they don't get so much attention that they don't deserve, because also too much attention can be negative. So you should deal with them as normal as possible. Like for instance, Hibban ibn Munqidh, he's also one of the companions of the Prophet, and he was just a normal person, and he was a tradesman, merchant, tajir. So his daily life was in the market of Medina, and he had an accident. His head struck a rock, and because of this accident he had mental disability. He cannot calculate well anymore as he did. He's not as intelligent and sharp as he was anymore, etc. So his children, out of goodwill, they said to him, it's enough, you did your best, we are rich enough, stay at home and we will take care of you. So this is the too much attention to the people. He went to the Prophet and he complained about this. He does not like to stay at home. He does not like to be spoiled as a child. He wants to do his work as he did before. But you have the problem, and this was also one of the concerns of his children, that he can be deceived in the market. This thing costs 1,000, people will sell it for him for 2,000. Then we will lose our money at the end. What the Prophet of Islam did is that he said, you can continue with your profession as you did, which is tijara. You can handle still, but on the condition, he gave a general condition to the market, that when this person deals with you, you have to be honest with him, because he is not as sharp-minded as he was before. So you have to be honest. So if it came out that you were not honest with him, his children has the right to nullify the whole transaction. So the contemporary religious scholars, they said this is one of the early state intervention in the economy, in the market, in order to protect these people, to integrate them in the market, to integrate them in the economy, but without causing any loss to the common community or the children of those people or their families, etc. Also, they make reference to the book of Ibn al-Jawzi, in which we see people of different forms and different degrees of disabilities together, besides very important people in the society, like the fuqaha, the muhaddithin, etc. So they have been part of society. Also the biographical work, very important biographical work of Al-Safadi from the 14th century, in which he mentioned more than 300 people with blindness. So he spoke about blind people only. And these people lived between the 7th and the 13th century, the time of the author, including poets, scholars, physicians. There have been even physicians and political figures, muazzins, those people skilled in Quran recitation. So you see them in every corner of the society, those people. And if they have not been normalized, this wouldn't have been possible. So, for instance, if they have been taken too much care of, as if they are abnormal people. You might see them in one corner of the society. But to see them in every corner of the society, it means they have been normalized. They get the support when it is needed, but when it is not needed, it's okay. They have to manage their life themselves, to be as independent as possible. So those people can be good, they can be bad, they can be funny, they can be boring, they can be whatever, as any other human being in life. Now I come to the conclusions. I'm not an advocate, a supporter of one-size-fits-all approach. And this is most of the time the case, at least in the Netherlands, when the authorities want to deal with Muslims. People with Muslim background, they are one single block. And you have most of the time a guideline how to deal with those people. I always say this is not a good thing. Because even now we speak about the religious aspect, not about the cultural aspect, pure religious, theological, legal aspect, and we have diversity of opinions within the Islamic tradition. They have been portrayed in so many different ways. Sometimes positive, sometimes negative, sometimes it can be positive and can be negative at the same time. So there is a diversity. So the issue of looking at people with disabilities from a Muslim community here in the West as one single block is the biggest mistake that healthcare workers can do. There is also the problem of trust between the users of the service and the providers of the service. The users of the service, they always mistrust the providers, that they don't understand them, or maybe they don't like to understand their position. They are always impatient to listen to them. And users of the service, they think most of the time the service these people provide is not very helpful to me. It does not accommodate my religious and cultural needs, so I don't need it. I will find my way in another way. Like for instance, in the Netherlands, they take their children to Morocco or to Turkey, the countries of origin, to be taken care of. There have been statistics in 2000, for instance, that more than half, more than 50% of families who have persons with disabilities from a non-Western background, so there is a big amount of Muslims therein, they never had contact with the healthcare providers in the disability care sector. They didn't make use of it at all. Which means there is something wrong. There is something wrong. In order to make the situation a bit better, I would say that those people should have a know-how about Islam and disability in general. And there is relevance of religion. Religion is relevant. So the different 5 images, when I checked literature on disability in the Netherlands, and especially where Muslims are involved, I found that the 5 images are available in this literature. In some families, in some communities, Muslim communities in the Netherlands, they are seen as normal people, help-deserving people, comic figures, pariah, place, whatever. You see almost everything. But it doesn't mean that, for instance, let's say that people say them as blessed or as godly saints, awliya, whatever, very close together. It looks positive. But in daily reality, it's not. Because different families who believe like this, they find the child a source of blessing in the family. If they are going to leave it to those non-Muslims who will take care of my child, then I refuse this blessing that God gave to me. So they will not send the child to a care center, for instance. So it's not always when you have a specific image which looks positive, it means that the real reaction will be positive at the end. So, but these images are there. And I also always underscore the dangers of overestimating the religious aspect. When I came to the Netherlands in 2000, it was my mission to tell people that religion is important. Now it's my mission to tell them it's not that important. It's not the only thing which is important. I remember once I was invited by the umbrella organization for healthcare insurance. And they asked me the advice how to approach Muslim families. They said that in the Netherlands we know the wishes of people, the trends of people who need healthcare insurance. But it's not clear for us what Muslims would need from a healthcare insurance company. I said, but this is not very difficult. He said, what? Is Islam very clear about it? I said, yes. They said, what Muslims do need? I said, they need high quality and low price. And when you get this, they will take you. They said, but this, I said, they are not aliens. They are normal people who would also have mind. They can think it over. And that's it. So imagine that you have a hospital full of praying rooms, but empty of qualified doctors. I will not go to this hospital. When I pray, I will go to the mosque. But when I go to the hospital, I expect qualified doctors who respect me as patient and my background. It's important. So the religion is very relevant and very important, especially when it is a difficult problem like disability in the family. Most of the people, they attach them to religion and they seek support from religion. But it's not only an issue of religion, it's also an issue of money. Is very important. It's an issue of care, the quality of the care, etc. So I always call for a holistic approach, that you take care of the different aspects and not that one aspect will be at the cost of the other aspect. Thank you very much, and that was it.